we are going to talk about Descartes' demon, and I know it's an topic that everybody was talking about, and it's written about a lot. We'll try to give it a new light or something, at least a little bit. So we are going to talk about Descartes' demon, his powers, and how his demon is the breakup with traditional Christian demonology. Now, let me say first what this talk is not about. So it's not about Cartesians that came after Descartes, who criticized the existence of demons altogether based on his mechanistic philosophy. Descartes himself might have believed in demons or not, but that's not what this talk is about. What this talk is about is more extended critique of the usual way we talk about Descartes. We talk about Descartes as a historical figure. His demon is nothing more than a rhetorical tool or a metaphor, and we don't really care how the demon originated in his writings, how Descartes came up with him. Now, the attempts to contextualize Descartes, to get him back to the 17th century are out there. So there are attempts to explain how his demon is a descendant of Christian demons from before. And the most recent attempts to make the parallels between Descartes and Christian demonology and his writings altogether are coming from two authors, Mercer and Forsman, who, and especially Mercer in 2016, who compared Descartes' meditations step by step with less known manuscript by Teresa de Avila. Teresa de Avila obviously described the steps well, in her case toward God, but steps of doubt, introduced demon as well in her manuscript. So the argument was that Descartes took that from her, and both of these authors developed and highlighted similarities between Teresa de Avila and Descartes. Now, what we want to do is to highlight the departure, to show how Descartes, even though he actually was probably influenced by Teresa de Avila, and he wrote his meditations within this tradition of the writings, meditative writings, he made a substantial departure. So I'm going to talk about the demons as they are portrayed in the old Christian literature, and their focus was basically practical. So the goal of demons in standard literature was to confuse us about what's good and bad. And their goal was to kind of take us further away from God so that we fall deeper into sin. So it's practical matter. Also, these demons are very limited, so their powers are not immense. They can fool us here and there in some matters, but not in all matters. And that's my part. Rastko will take over, and he'll tell you about Descartes' demon and how Descartes, actually with his demon, was making a thought experiment, but not just 20th century thought experiment, but the thought experiment specific to his time and to his world, and he was pushing the boundaries of his world of the 17th century, that was different from ours in many ways. That was still the world in which there were angels and demons and other creatures roamed this world. So, okay, so let me say something about demons. we know the most famous one. The most famous one is Satan. That's the one who fooled Adam and Eve, and because of him, here is the snake, because of him, we fell from the grace, became mortal, now we get sick, we die, and all these unfortunate things happened. The same Satan also appears in the New Testament. He tempts Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ resists the temptations. He wins him over. But in the New Testament, there are other demons as well. Smaller demons. They possess people. And Jesus and his disciples later on have the power to chase them away and to liberate people who are possessed. Now, in the early centuries, and Noel was talking about this period yesterday, in the early centuries of Christianity, pagans and Christians lived side by side, and pagans happened to have their own daimons, lesser gods. These daimons, according to popular belief, could be good or bad. And we had to make sacrifices to please them to be on our side. If we don't, they can harm us. Now, one of the pagan philosophers, Celsus, wrote about this superstition. He thought that this was the wrong way of viewing these daimons. These daimons were actually ontologically higher and better than us, and had to be morally better as well. They were more powerful, and they had to be morally better than us. People wrongly believe that they would harm us. They don't want to, they would not to, because they are ontologically higher than us. According to Origen, that wasn't the case. If you are more powerful being, ontologically higher than human being, you can still be lower, morally lower than a human. If a human being, if a man or a woman believes in Jesus Christ, that is, has the proper faith, they are safe and they are morally better than the demons. According to Origen, of course, and according to Christians, all demons were bad. And their goal was to deceive us and push us into sin and further away from God. Okay, we won't read the whole quote, but this is just to sum up the powers of demons according to St. Augustine. For St. Augustine, demons are, of course, created beings. They are fallen angels. They are like angels in their powers. Well, they lost a bit of their powers by their fall, but they still had the knowledge of the world that is better than our knowledge. We are more limited than they are. They are faster than us. Now, the only miracle possible in this world is the miracle that God did, and that's the miracle of creation. Demons cannot do that. What they could do is to use their knowledge of the world and the nature of things to speed things up. For example, to make the flowers bloom faster. So it appears as a miracle to us, but it's not really a miracle, it's a trick. Bad men, if they are knowledgeable, could do similar things than demons, as demons. So that's how St. Augustine viewed them. Now, in monastic literature, demons play a crucial role. They are there to tempt the saints, and saints prove their sanctity by resisting the temptation and seeing through their deception. My favorite desert father, Evagrius Ponticus, described in details how that happens, and that's relevant actually to what will happen later on in Teresa de Avila's manuscript and with Descartes. How they deceive us? Well, they wait, for example, they wait for the weakness in monk. The monk is fasting for a long time, and he's hungry, and the demon plants the thought in monk's mind that it's fine now to overeat, but overeating will shortly lead to lustful images, that can lead to avarice, anger, sadness, into spiral of sin. So that's the way of their deception. But even if the monk resists all of that, pride and vainglory are there to capture the monk. So the demon will plant in that monk who resisted everything the thought how he's better than everybody else. Now, that's their goal. Their main goal is to convince us that what is good is bad and what is bad is good. So to confuse us about the moral domain, so to speak, and to get us away from God. Now, for Evagrius, it was very important, and that's also something that is that appears in Descartes, and it's important for Descartes later on. It's very important to differentiate between good thoughts that are coming from God, that are true, and bad thoughts that demons plant into our minds. And the criterion that he offers is, he says, well, look, if the thought suggests something self-serving, like, oh, I feel bad, I am melancholic, I should go out and talk to people, if the focus is on the self, it's from the demon. If the thought says, well, you should sacrifice for others, you should pay attention and pray to God to give you grace and to forgive your sin. If the thought is on God, not on the self, it's the true thought. So that's his criterion of true and false. Now, fast forward to Teresa de Avila. When we look at her manuscript, we see that she works in this tradition of desert fathers. And the demon that occurs to her is the demon that Evagrius describes. It's the demon that is there to confuse her about what's good in the world, what's good for her and her salvation and for her soul. And in this quote, she says, the demon can actually, the devil, can represent these snakes, and these are these worldly things, and the temporal pleasure of the present as though almost eternal. The demon confuses her to believe that this world is all there is and it's what's ultimate good, and that's not the case. And I'm going to stop here and then give my word to Rastko, who is going now to talk about Descartes.
I think it's clear now from Professor's talk how the medieval traditional demons were practical and morally relevant, and how they were always a part of some, they are created creatures, they are part of some kind of hierarchy that God has established. I think that there is a big we think that there is a big difference when it comes to Descartes' demon. So I will go through this contrast between practical and moral relevance in medieval, let's say, philosophy, and then theoretical and metaphysical relevance of Descartes' demon. And then also the crucial ontological difference between finiteness of medieval demons and the infiniteness of Descartes' demon. And this is the, I guess, I don't have enough time to be really detailed, and it doesn't matter because this is, I guess, usual philosophical knowledge, but these two characteristics, these two properties of demons, of Descartes' demon, people usually say this about his doubt, but it can be transferred to his demon as well. So it is said that Descartes' demon is hyperbolic and that it is hypothetical. And these two moments, which are frequently mentioned, we believe that they mark these points of breakup between medieval and early modern demonology, but that this is not usually realized. Why is it hyperbolic? Because before Descartes, no demon was even possibly imagined as being supremely powerful. Demons were always finite in their power, and they were always making problems, practical problems, and practical problems in particular cases. And then Descartes' demon is something different. And why is it Descartes' demon hypothetical? Because by the third meditation, by the end of the third meditation, we actually know that ultimately this demon cannot exist, but he's a real possibility in the first and the second meditation. Obviously, nobody actually doubted that medieval demons exist. They are a part of the world, let's say it like that. So how is the theoretical and metaphysical relevance in contrast to practical and moral relevance of medieval demons established? We shouldn't go into details, not enough time, but the point is that when this possibility of Descartes' demon existing is actually entertained, then some kind of privileged class of notions, ideas, propositions, whatever, is brought to light. Obviously, the first of those is cogito ergo sum, or whatever, doesn't matter, the details don't matter, but this is precisely the moment, I think, that brings to light how this shift from practical to theoretical happens. And the second moment, the second thesis about the infinity of Descartes' demon, I think is a little bit more interesting. Why? Because if we just follow through the text of the first meditation, the difference between medieval demons and Descartes' demon will be obvious, I guess. So this second phase of doubt, the Descartes' methodological doubt, as you know, is the dream phase, and it is not enough. Something is left as being true, let's say, and these are the most simple and most general natures, as Descartes calls them. So in practice, what does this mean? That there is something true in dreams, even though all this whole stream of experience is not really true. But as Descartes makes an analogy with a painting, so let's say we take some kind of complex representation of a unicorn. Obviously, unicorn does not exist, but the idea of horn and the idea of a horse are real ideas, and this is the case in dreams as well. So there is something true in dreams, and this is what Descartes does not like. So he goes further, and then this is the first moment in the first meditation where this is the moment where this being that can induce the most radical kind of skepticism is introduced. And why I'm looking for the precise formulation, because it is not any kind of demon. This is the first time this radical phase of doubt is talked about, written about. And Descartes mentions God and not demon. He says, and it firmly rooted in my mind is the long-standing opinion that there is an omnipotent God who made me the kind of creature I am, so the creator. And then he talks about how this supreme being could have the possibility of actually making us believe that all of these things exist, the most simple, the most general natures, and while they do not exist. And he mentions mathematics as well. And then at the end of the passage, he says, okay, but God would not have allowed for this. Why? Because he's supremely good as well. And then the point is that this most radical skeptical scenario is not brought in by mentioning any kind of demon. The second time this kind of the most radical kind of doubt is introduced, then this happens. I will suppose, therefore, that not God, who is supremely good and the source of truth, but rather some malicious demon of the utmost power and cunning, has employed all his energies in order to deceive me. So if you just follow the text through, I won't read the whole passage. The point is that the idea of malicious, the evil demon, this is the first time the evil demon is mentioned in meditations. And the second part, the skeptical inducing being is mentioned. So this idea of evil demon, the malicious demon, is not introduced by itself independently of any other possibility of supreme being a deceiver. No, it is mentioned after the fact that God is mentioned. So this kind of, let's say, this is the main moment of breakup. Why? Because the God is a model for the Descartes demon, and not any kind of traditional medieval demon, and not any kind of being that is usually thought of as a traditional demon. So the idea of Descartes' demon, the so-called evil demon, the malicious demon, is dependent on God, on the notion of God, and not on the notion of any kind of traditional demon. So why does Descartes do this? So obviously because a medieval demon would not have the power to induce the most radical kind of doubt. So he needs something more, and he needs a being that has this property, obviously, omnipotence. Traditional demons are not omnipotent. And then this is the main reason for the modeling the idea of the evil demon on the idea of God. And obviously the key difference is malevolence. And this modeling actually happens, let's say, modeling happens in the principles as well. So it's obvious from these passages that while the notion of the supreme deceiving being is developed, the property of omnipotence is in focus, while the property of supreme goodness or benevolence and malevolence are not. They are added in. They are the ones that are shifting. So to come back to our original characterization, Descartes' demon is hyperbolic because it is modeled on the idea of God and not on the idea of a traditional demon. And why is it hypothetical? Because, because it's hyperbolic. Why? Because when the notion of God is fully developed, that's when the notion of malicious demon becomes contradictory. Then it's impossible for such a being to exist. But it is a real possibility before the notion of God is fully developed. So we didn't want to write this up because it's kind of scary, but it seems to us that Descartes' demon is the first time, let's say, in history of philosophy that actually it's the first time that the possibility of God being bad or of a demon being omnipotent is happening. It seems to us that this is the first time. Thank you very much.
Well, this is very interesting, and especially because if you look at the history of theodicy, which I brought up yesterday, right, which becomes very prominent in the 17th century, right, a lot of Cartesians are in fact participating in this debate because one of the, you might say one of the talking points of that entire field is the possibility that God, given the kind of evil that exists in the world, both natural and moral evil, that it was brought about by a kind of real, right, hyperbolic demon, right? So that whole way of thinking about the kind of being that God is, I can see that very much coming from this sort of position that you're talking about. So Malebranche, for example, is one of the Cartesians, and of course Leibniz and so forth. So that's very illuminating, actually, right? So that's very illuminating. I was wondering whether, again, I don't know how far you'd want to pursue this, but if you go, let's say 3 decades after Descartes, right, we have Paradise Lost. And the figure of Satan, and what Satan becomes under those circumstances. And there's a kind of interesting story about, right, how Satan becomes Satan, because, right, we start with an idea that he's really one of God's angels, maybe the head angel, but God's angel, so it begins as a sort of subordinated status, right, so maybe a bit like the medieval, right, demons. But one of the things that Satan does when he persuades all the other angels to revolt, right, is that he says, well, the reason why we're subordinate is because God is restricting our inherent powers, which would make us as powerful as him. Right? And that's the premise, right, for the war that takes place in the heavens, right? That in some sense, God is restricting. So all those medieval demons that you were talking about maybe were just enslaved by God. But they, too, had the divine power within them just as great as God's power. And the point of this kind of self-emancipation, right, is to show that, right, so that they can be competitive deities, okay? And this kind of imagery, right, of the power of the people, against the aristocrats becomes very powerful, right, in the English Civil War and all the other revolutionary movements that take place in the modern era. Karl Marx, right, quotes Paradise Lost a lot on the Satan side, okay? And I'm just wondering whether there's any evidence in Descartes or any of these Cartesians, whether they had something like that too in mind, or were they really strictly keeping it at the hypothetical level? Because in a sense, Milton is trying to give a genealogy of how you go from the medieval demon into this kind of Cartesian demon, right? Which is realized. Is there any evidence of that?
Well, I think it all, as is usual with Descartes, it all hinges on God. So it's a big thing to leave out. There is no real possibility of demon existing if God exists. That's the thing, because they are both omnipotent beings, and one is benevolent. They are both creators. One is benevolent, one is evil. So when the first is established, the second one, there is no metaphysical, logical. It's a contradiction. But about the devil rebelling, the thing that, can I use this? Okay, never mind. Oh, it works. So I think that this passage is illuminating in terms of really understanding what is God's power and what are the limits that is unlimits of God's power, and what are the limits of the power of any kind of demon. So this cannot be done by anything else but by God, and that is to make everything appear as it exists, but existing, but not actually existing. So it's the power of, let's say, total creation. And it's really hard to imagine any other kind of creature having this power, but actually existing in time. Let's say it like that. So maybe not in space, but in time. So this is a key difference. And then if you think about a being that is really, really extremely powerful, it would actually be on the side of, let's say, dream kind of skepticism, if it induced skepticism. Why? Because the difference is the universality of the God's influence versus this, however extended, it's always impartial kind of influence that is made by any kind of finite being. So God is arrogant. I mean, this is, I guess, the mainstream story, but God is arrogant because, not God, sorry, the devil is arrogant because he thinks that he can be powerful. He cannot be that powerful, actually.
It's ambiguous in Milton, and that's why in fact people like Marx were inspired by this, right? Because it's kind of ambiguous whether Satan is, wrong or right on this point.
I'm interested in about the divine attributes here. So when you think about God, omnipotent, omniscient, omnibenevolent, here we got this hypothetical demon, omnipotent, perfect. Do you think that Descartes' demon also needs to be omniscient? It needs to know a great deal to know that it is indeed deceiving and not accidentally giving you the truth that it thinks is false, if that makes sense. Of course. So do you think then it would be consistent to imagine an omnipotent, omniscient, but bad entity? Do you think that's consistent? Because that would imply there is nothing good about knowledge and there's nothing good about power. That would render it impossible by an inconsistency.
I think that on this point, Descartes is totally medieval. And what this means is that there is this unity of attributes in such kind of being. The Supreme Being has all of these attributes. Actually, the distinction between these attributes is purely our distinction. It's a conceptual distinction, not a distinction that is ontological, that is real. So while Descartes entertains the possibility that God can be bad, he actually has a totally, let's say, medieval background on when he tries to shift all of these possibilities.
Yeah, it's consistent for us, not for him. Yeah, that's...
Yes, okay, there we go, yeah. There we go, okay.
It's even worse. I mean, worse, whatever that means. Why? Because, for instance, in conversations with Burman, he actually says that to be a deceiver in such a way as evil demon, that is inconsistent with omnipotence as well. Mm-hmm. So this is totally like medieval picture.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.